Well, way back, they always say the most difficult film is your second film. The first film you take risks, and if you're lucky, well, you're lucky. But then people expect you to make the first film again the same. And I refused to do that, so it was very, very difficult to raise the money. It was a film called Z and Two Noughts, which in shorthand is simply called Zoo, Z-O-O. And it was all made in Rotterdam Zoo. The entire film was made in a zoo. But it was a very, very busy film, and there were lots of ideas in it. And London Time Out at the time said there were 3 films all struggling to take preference. But I will say, although I don't think the acting was very good and some mise-en-scène was rather clumsy, if ever anybody gave me any money to make one of my films again, that would be the film I'd make, because it was so ridiculously ambitious. I made a film called 8½ Women, which was my homage to Fellini 8½. And it was really about male sexual fantasy. And it was really, too difficult for the public. And it was absolutely crashed at Cannes, I remember. Normally Cannes Film Festival treat me quite well, but they really smashed into this film. And mainly it was the males who objected because they didn't like their fantasies being exposed in the cinema, I'm convinced. Well, it's very difficult for me to talk about British cinema. Would you find it very boastful if I would say I'm not a very good British citizen anymore, but I think I'm a good European? I've lived now for about 30 years in Holland, and I have a long-term Dutch producer. I think we must have made about 80 films now, and we've now about to embark on our 16th feature film. So although my Dutch is very, very bad, although I do have children who are totally bilingual, there is a way, I don't know, maybe it's sometimes a bit convenient. If the Dutch film finance want to regard me as a Dutchman, they regard me as a Dutchman. But I still think I make very, very English films. Well, cinema was invented as a dumbed-down, cheap form of entertainment for the proletariat, but there's no proletariat anymore. In Europe, where's the proletariat gone? We're all bourgeois. So I think the purposes of the notion of cheap cinema has changed completely. I suppose we have much, different levels of communication, different layers of ability and sophistication. Several years ago I made a film, you might have heard of it, called The Cook Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, which was probably seen by 50 million people in the world. But I make a European art movie now, and I'm lucky maybe if 8 million people see it. The audiences are just disappearing. And the old pluralism, which was very exciting at the time of the Nouvelle Vague and time in the middle period Italian cinema, was extraordinary. But it's very largely gone now. If you were to make a list of really visionary filmmakers in Europe, it wouldn't be very long anymore. Lars von Trier and Almodovar, and then what? It's very, very difficult to find people who consistently have a cinematic identity and continue to make really invigorating films. I'm probably saying things which are very unpopular, and all sorts of filmmakers will put their hands up and say, what about me, what about me, what about me? But I think, that's the status quo, and it's indicative that cinema really is dead. Well, it's never easy. It's never easy. And in a curious way, you've always got to start at the bottom again. You can't necessarily rest on your reputation on what you did 10 years ago. But I rather suspect, I'm here in Brussels because of what I did 10 years ago, not what I'm doing now. But we're very, very busy. I've never been busier. We have 5 films in the pipeline. We just finished one. Hopefully it'll be at the Venice Film Festival. We start a new film in Mexico about Einstein. Then I'm remaking Death in Venice. Then there's a film in Romania. And then there's a film in Japan. And so it goes on. So lots and lots of films. Whether people will look at them at all, I don't know. We'll see.